That night with my son Ethan was by far one of the most unforgettable and unexpectedly intense nights of my life. My name is David, and I want to share a story about something that happened between my son and me. It's not easy to talk about, but I've carried it for too long, like a shadow that follows me through every quiet moment. Ethan is 19 now, but this all began a few years ago, right after my wife Isabella passed away from a long battle with illness. Losing her shattered our world in ways I could never have prepared for. She was the glue that held our family together, the one who filled our home with laughter, homemade meals, and that effortless warmth that made even the toughest days bearable. Without her, Ethan and I were left adrift in a sea of grief, trying to figure out how to keep going in a house that suddenly felt too big, too empty. At first, the pain was all-consuming. Ethan, who had always been outgoing and full of energy as a kid, retreated into himself. He'd spend hours locked in his room, scrolling through his phone or blasting music through his headphones to drown out the silence. Or he'd disappear for entire afternoons with his friends, coming home late with barely a word. He avoided any mention of his mom, and I didn't push him. How could I? I was barely holding it together myself, waking up each morning with that hollow ache in my chest, going through the motions of work and chores just to keep from falling apart. Instead of forcing conversations, I tried to show him I was there in other ways. Cooking his favorite dishes like spaghetti carbonara or grilled cheese with tomato soup. Leaving encouraging notes on his desk like, "Proud of you, kid, keep pushing," or making sure his laundry was folded and ready. Small things, but they were all I had to offer in those dark months. For what felt like an eternity, he stayed distant, like a ghost haunting his own life. Then one crisp autumn evening, while I was wiping down the counters after a solitary dinner, he wandered into the kitchen. His sudden appearance startled me. It had been so long since he'd sought me out for anything more than a quick good night. He leaned against the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets, his dark hair tousled as if he'd just woken from a nap. "Need a hand, Dad?" he asked, his voice softer than usual, almost tentative. I blinked, setting down the dishcloth. "Sure, Ethan. You can load the dishwasher if you want." We worked side by side in silence, the clink of plates and the hum of the faucet the only sounds breaking the quiet. But there was something different about it, a subtle shift, like the first crack in a frozen lake after a long winter. I didn't want to jinx it, so I kept things light. "How was practice today? Soccer team's looking good this season?" He shrugged, stacking a bowl carefully. "It was all right. Scored a goal in scrimmage." That was all, but it was more than he'd shared in weeks. I didn't press for details. I was just grateful for the opening. Over the following weeks, those small changes snowballed into something more noticeable. Ethan started lingering around the house more, joining me in the living room while I watched old reruns of action movies or documentaries on history, things we used to enjoy together as a family. He'd help with yard work without being asked, raking leaves or mowing the lawn. And he'd open up about his day at school, the tough math test he'd aced, the drama with his friends, even his dreams of maybe studying engineering in college. It felt like we were rebuilding, piece by piece, finding a new rhythm in the absence of Isabella. I began to feel a spark of hope, like maybe we could create a different kind of normal, one that honored her memory without being defined by the loss. One rainy Friday evening, we decided to cook dinner together for the first time in ages. Ethan had picked up a recipe for stir-fry from an online video, something simple with chicken, veggies, and rice. As we chopped ingredients at the kitchen island, the sizzle of the wok filling the air with savory aromas, he paused and looked at me across the counter. "You're incredible, Dad," he said out of nowhere. His blue eyes that looked so much like his mother's, meeting mine with an intensity that caught me off guard. I chuckled, trying to brush it off as I stirred the pan. "Thanks, Ethan. Coming from you, that means the world." But his face remained serious, no hint of his usual playful smirk. "No, really.
Thanks for everything you've done."
Holding it all together after Mom. "I don't know how you did it." The weight in his words hung in the air, thick and unspoken. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "We're in this together, son. Always have been." He nodded, but there was more in his expression, something lingering, like words trapped on the tip of his tongue. From that night onward, his presence around me intensified. He was always there, offering to help with groceries, fixing things around the house, or just sitting nearby with a book or his laptop. It seemed innocent enough, a son reconnecting with his father after a shared tragedy. But deep down, I sensed we were drifting toward uncharted waters, a night that would redefine everything we thought we knew about our bond. Life's demands never let up, bills to pay, the car needing an oil change, the endless cycle of work emails even on weekends. One afternoon, as I sorted through a pile of mail at the dining table, Ethan appeared in the doorway. "You okay, Dad? You look exhausted." I waved him off with a tired smile. "Just the usual stuff. There's always something." He shook his head, stepping closer, his gaze unwavering. "You do way too much. You deserve a break, you know that?" His words twisted something deep in my chest, a mix of warmth and unease I couldn't quite pinpoint. "That's kind of you to say," I replied, forcing the smile to stay put. "But I'm managing, really." That night, sleep evaded me entirely. I tossed and turned in the darkness, the ceiling fan whirring overhead as I replayed his words over and over. Was it just concern from a caring son? Or was my mind playing tricks, reading into things that weren't there? In the days that followed, Ethan found every excuse to be near me. If I was in the garage tinkering with an old bike, he'd wander in and strike up a conversation about his latest video game obsession. If I was out in the backyard tending to the vegetable garden Isabella had loved so much, he'd pull up a chair and watch, occasionally jumping in to weed or water the plants. His compliments flowed more freely now, each one leaving a subtle ripple in my thoughts. "You make everything seem easier, Dad, or I don't know what I'd do without you." And if I'm being completely honest with myself, I started mirroring it, lingering in the hallway outside his room, asking about his day even when I knew he was busy, finding reasons to share space with him. One sunny Saturday afternoon, I was in the laundry room folding a basket of clean clothes, the scent of fresh detergent filling the air. Ethan poked his head in, leaning against the door frame. "You make this place feel like home again," he said quietly, his voice carrying a depth that made me pause mid-fold. I froze for a heartbeat, then resumed, keeping my tone light. "Thanks, Ethan, that means a lot coming from you." But inside, a shift was happening, a quiet undercurrent I wasn't sure how to navigate. I told myself it was nothing, just grief manifesting in odd ways, him compensating for the years of emotional walls after Isabella's death. Yet it wasn't only the words, it was the lingering glances, the way he'd brush past me in the narrow hallway, the unspoken pull that kept drawing us closer. And strangely, I found myself responding in kind, without fully understanding why. A few days later, I was in the kitchen prepping vegetables for a stew, the rhythmic chop of the knife against the cutting board a soothing distraction. I heard his footsteps on the tiled floor but didn't turn, hoping he'd grab a snack and head back to his room. "Need some help, Dad?" he asked, his voice close behind me. I glanced over my shoulder with a brief smile. "Yeah, you can dice these onions if you're up for it." He moved to stand beside me, his arm occasionally grazing mine as we worked. The silence stretched, comfortable at first, but then he set down his knife. "You've sacrificed so much for me," he said, his tone low and earnest. I looked at him, puzzled. "What brought that on?" His eyes locked onto mine, unwavering. "After Mom died, you put your whole life on hold. You didn't have to, but you did. For me." A sharp pang echoed in my chest, memories of those early days flooding back, the endless nights of paperwork, the quiet sobs in the shower so he wouldn't hear. "Of course I did, Ethan. You're my son. I love you more than anything." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it wavered just a touch. He nodded slowly, but his gaze held fast. I never really thanked you properly." You don't need to thank me, I said, turning back to the stove to hide the emotion rising. That's what fathers do. The air felt charged, too heavy for the simple task at hand. Finally, he picked up the knife again, and I exhaled silently in relief. That evening, I settled on the couch with a mystery novel, the soft lamplight casting long shadows across the room. I hoped to escape into the story, away from the swirling thoughts. Ethan entered the living room, not heading to his usual armchair across the way, but plopping down right next to me, his knee brushing mine.
What are you reading?
He asked, leaning in to peer at the cover, his shoulder warm against my arm. Just a thriller. Nothing groundbreaking, I replied, shifting slightly. Mind if I join you? Read it together? The request surprised me. He hadn't shown interest in books since middle school when we'd share bedtime stories. Part of me wanted to decline to our middle school when we'd share bedtime stories. Part of me wanted to decline to reclaim some space, but another part, the one that cherished these reconnections, won out. Sure, why not? I said, scooting over a bit. He leaned closer as I read aloud, his breath steady and close. At first, it evoked fond memories of simpler times, but as the chapter wore on, I realized his attention wasn't on the words. It was on me, studying my face, my hands turning the pages. When I finished, I closed the book with a snap. That's it for tonight. Thanks for sharing that with me, he murmured, his voice soft in the dim light. Anytime, I said, standing abruptly and heading toward my bedroom. Good night, Ethan. Night, Dad, he called after me, something unreadable in his tone that lingered long after I shut the door. The next morning, the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and toast when I walked in. Ethan was at the stove, flipping eggs with a focused expression. Morning, Dad, he said brightly, sliding a plate toward me. I made breakfast. Figured you could use a treat. Thanks, Ethan, I said, sitting down warily. This is unexpected. He joined me at the table, pouring himself a mug. You work so hard every day, he said suddenly, his eyes earnest. You deserve someone looking out for you, too. I swallowed hard, the words stirring that familiar mix of comfort and disquiet. That's thoughtful, but you don't have to worry about me. I want to, he insisted, his voice firm yet gentle. After breakfast, I escaped to the garden, the morning sun filtering through the leaves as I knelt among the tomato plants. The earthy scent and repetitive motions usually cleared my head, but today, my mind raced. I didn't hear Ethan approach until his shadow fell over me. Mind if I join you? He asked, hands in his jeans pockets. Of course not, I replied, though a small voice inside whispered for solitude. We sat on the wooden bench Isabella had picked out years ago, the breeze rustling the foliage around us. Birds chirped in the distance, a peaceful soundtrack to the silence. You've seemed off lately, he said eventually, breaking the quiet. Everything all right? Just a lot on my plate, I answered, staring at the flower beds. Work stuff, mostly. Is it me? He pressed, his voice soft but direct. The question jolted me. Why would you think that? He shrugged, kicking at a pebble. I don't know. Feels like I've been bothering you or something. You haven't, I assured him quickly. I'm just tired, that's all. He nodded, but the silence stretched again. After a minute, he stood. I'll give you some space then, he said quietly, heading back inside. I watched him go, a knot of unease tightening in my gut. He hadn't done a single thing wrong, so why did this heaviness persist? The following days carried an odd tension, like a storm cloud hovering just out of sight. I stuck to my routines, grocery runs, paying bills, even tackling a long overdue home repair project in the basement. But whenever Ethan was nearby, that undercurrent hummed between us, unspoken and electric. One evening, seeking respite, I excused myself after dinner and retreated to my bedroom early. The space felt like a sanctuary. Soft sheets, a stack of books on the nightstand, the faint glow of the bedside lamp creating a bubble of calm. I dove into a historical fiction novel, losing myself in tales of far-off adventures, and for the first time in a while, the weight lifted slightly. Then came the knock, gentle, almost hesitant. "Dad?" Ethan's voice filtered through the door, laced with uncertainty.
Yeah, I called back, marking my page.
"Can I come in?" It was late, the clock ticking past 11 p.m., well beyond his usual bedtime routine. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting up against the headboard. "I just need to talk," he replied. I set the book aside, a flicker of concern overriding my need for peace. "Come on in." The door opened slowly, and Ethan stepped inside, illuminated by the hallway light. He looked vulnerable in that moment. His broad shoulders slumped slightly, his usual confidence dimmed, reminding me of the scared boy who'd crawl into our bed after bad dreams as a child. "What's bothering you?" I asked, gesturing to the foot of the bed. He sat down carefully, staring at his hands clasped in his lap. After a long pause, he lifted his eyes to mine. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "For what?" I prompted gently, leaning forward. "For making things weird lately. I know I've been hanging around more, saying stuff. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or like I'm pushing too hard." His honesty hit me like a wave, raw and unexpected. Tears glistened in his eyes and my heart ached for him, for us. "Ethan, listen," I said softly, reaching out to place a hand on his shoulder. "Grief does strange things to people. It can make us cling tighter or pull away, or confuse emotions we don't understand. But we're family. Father and son. We get through this by being honest and trusting each other." He nodded, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. "I know. I'm just sorry if I've made it harder." I squeezed his shoulder reassuringly, feeling the warmth of his skin through his shirt, the solid reality of him there in the quiet room. In that moment, the tension that had built over weeks seemed to crack. But little did I know it was only the beginning of a deeper unraveling. One that would lead to that unforgettable night where boundaries blurred and everything changed forever. A family's unspoken truths. The air in the living room felt thick, heavy with the weight of words left unsaid. I sat on the couch, my hands resting on my knees, watching my daughter, Lily, fidget with the hem of her sweater. She hadn't looked me in the eye all evening, and that alone was enough to set my nerves on edge. "You don't have to worry about it, Mom," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll figure it out together." I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Okay, sweetheart." She gave a quick nod in return and stood, her movements stiff. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, Lily," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. I watched her retreat down the hallway, her silhouette fading into the dim light of the house. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with a gnawing unease that settled deep in my chest. She'd opened up, even if just a little, and that felt like progress. But as the quiet of the house enveloped me, I couldn't shake the question, would things ever feel normal again? The next morning, I woke with a heaviness that clung to me like damp fog. Our conversation from the night before had looped in my mind, keeping sleep at bay. Lily was quieter than usual at breakfast, her eyes fixed on her cereal bowl, her spoon stirring absent-mindedly. I thought about asking her if she was okay, but something told me to give her space. Sometimes time was the only thing that could mend what words couldn't. That evening, I was in the kitchen, sorting through a pile of mail, when Lily wandered in. She didn't say anything, just perched on a stool at the counter, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. The silence stretched heavy and expectant until I couldn't take it anymore. "You've been quiet today," I said, glancing at her over a stack of envelopes. She shrugged, her fingers tracing the edge of the countertop. "Just thinking. About anything specific?" I asked, keeping my tone light, though my heart was starting to race. "About us," she said, her voice so soft I almost missed it. I froze, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully, setting the mail aside. She hesitated, her eyes meeting mine for the first time that day. "I know things have been off lately. I don't want it to stay like that." I nodded slowly, choosing my words with care. I don't want that either, Lily, but we need to figure out how to move forward together. A faint smile flickered across her face, and for a moment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of something bigger, something I didn't fully understand. The unease lingered in the house like an unwelcome guest. Lily tried to act normal, chatting about school, helping with dishes, but I could see the strain in her eyes, the way her smile faltered when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she hesitated before speaking, as if weighing every word. One night, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, the house was still except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. A soft knock at my bedroom door startled me. "Mom?" Lily's voice was hesitant, almost fragile. I sat up, my chest tightening. "Yeah, Lily. Come in." The door creaked open and she stepped inside, her hands buried in the pockets of her hoodie. She lingered near the doorway, her gaze fixed on the floor. "What's wrong?" I asked gently, trying to mask the worry creeping into my voice. She took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling. "I've been thinking about what I said the other night." "I need to be honest with you." "Honest about what?" I asked, my heart pounding now. She stepped closer, sitting on the edge of my bed, her hands still tucked away. "I've been in trouble, Mom. After Grandma passed, I didn't know how to deal with it. I made some bad choices." The words hit me like a punch. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Money. I got mixed up with some people I shouldn't have. I thought I could handle it on my own, but it's gotten worse." I stared at her, my mind racing. "Lily, why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to burden you," she said, her voice breaking. "You've already done so much for me." I reached out, placing a hand on her arm. "You're not a burden, Lily. We're in this together. But you have to tell me everything. No more secrets." Her shoulders slumped and she nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this bad." "I know," I said softly. "But keeping it hidden only makes it harder. We'll figure this out, okay?" She nodded again, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "Good night, Mom," she murmured, standing and heading for the door. "Good night," I replied, watching as she slipped out and closed the door behind her. As soon as she was gone, I leaned back against the headboard, my mind spinning. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. I wanted to help her, to fix this, but I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, Lily was quiet at breakfast, her eyes avoiding mine as she picked at her toast. When she left for school, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. All day, her words echoed in my head, each one heavier than the last. That night when she came home, she went straight to her room without a word. I wanted to talk to her, to ask for more details, but I didn't know how to start without pushing her away. The weight of her secret hung in the air, a constant reminder that things were shifting beneath our feet. Later that evening, I was in the living room, sorting through a basket of laundry, when I heard footsteps. I turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Can I sit with you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Of course." She walked over and sat on the couch, leaving a small space between us. For a while we sat in silence, the tension between us almost palpable. "Mom," she said finally, her voice soft but steady, "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said quickly, my heart aching at the fear in her words. "But we need to set some boundaries, Lily. For both of us." She nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I understand." I reached out, resting a hand lightly on her knee. "We'll get through this, but you have to trust me." "I do," she said, looking up at me with eyes full of emotion. I gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Then we'll be okay." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope, but I knew rebuilding our connection would take time. The days that followed were tense, filled with a quiet that felt more like a ceasefire than peace. Lily kept her distance, and I tried to act like everything was normal, but the truth weighed heavily on me. I hoped that acknowledging her struggles and setting boundaries would help us move forward. But something told me the silence wasn't enough to heal what had been broken. One night, I went to bed early, exhausted from the constant whirl of my thoughts. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves outside my window. I tried to let the rhythm of the night lull me to sleep, but my mind refused to settle. At some point, I must have drifted off because the creak of my bedroom door jolted me awake. "Mom?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, trembling in the darkness. I reached for the bedside lamp, its warm glow illuminating her figure in the doorway. Her hands were fidgeting nervously, her eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place. "Lily, what's wrong?" I asked, sitting up. She hesitated, then stepped inside, her voice barely audible. "I need to tell you something else." Something I didn't say before. My heart sank, but I nodded, bracing myself. "Okay, sweetheart. I'm listening."